You know, if I had a nickel for every time I played a 3D action-adventure game within the last 20 years that featured the ability to use the moves of a fighting game character with simple button presses, I would have 2 nickels. Which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it's happened twice, right? I think it comes as a shock to literally no one that I was going to make a video on this wild-ass game the second it was announced, but I don't think anyone would have expected it to happen so soon. I will admit, part of this is because I didn't have to pay for it, not that I got it for free from Capcom. I did, however, get it gifted to me as a slightly early birthday present from my friend Jordan, who then told me to get to high rank in a week. Sorry to disappoint you, but it actually took me like 2. I actually feel kind of bad because he paid full price for it rather than waiting for it to go on sale like a normal person. Not like I have much room to talk, I paid full price for Slime Rancher 2 because a friend of mine really wanted to stream it, but she mentioned wanting to wait for a sale, and I, like some sort of affectionate idiot, bought it for her immediately.
I hope she sees this. I hope she sees this.
Monster Hunter Wilds is an incredible game, and I think that that's pretty clear. Reviewers love it, players love it, I love it. I can't sing its praises enough, but I can talk them out, and that's what I'm gonna do. You'd be shocked to know that while I don't think it's incredible by any means, I do find the story of this game, even within the context of Monster Hunter's lax stories at the best of times, to be one of the better in the series. Which, to be fair, isn't saying much, but I think it's important to say. I'm not saying that a story about your player character traveling to a brand new, uncharted area and learning about the native people and reuniting a lost child with their own is anything special, but there's something about it that I just like a whole lot. I can compare it to World in a way, which is heresy to some. World had this problem in its story where it felt strangely colonialist, if that makes sense? Which is weird when both of these games have the same premise, but I need you to stick with me here. Monster Hunter World was about exploring quote-unquote the new world, to the point of making a whole-ass plopped-down outpost on the edge of a seemingly hostile area. I recognize Astera has been there for seemingly a long time, but it felt strangely aggressive that it existed in the first place. Only amplified by the fact that the camp had like 5 floors of things to do, a fully kitted out forge, all of that. The feeling is only amplified when you take Iceborne into account too, because you do the same thing when you touch down and immediately make Celiana. I feel like this is in part due to naming them like you would a town. Someone who I'd say is my co-writer for this episode, Kyle, he mentioned that the colonialist themes are arguably amplified by the existence of the First Wyverians. Consider that the First Wyverians kind of just exist? From a gameplay standpoint, why is impressing them the gateway into doing high-rank quests, as if they're agents of the guild? Their name very much tries to evoke the idea of First Nation people, or Native Americans, which play into the stereotype of not having settlements and just living on the land while also being chill with the settlers just kinda moving in. World just drops them in without elaboration, and then they don't show up again. I wish that quote-unquote first Wyverians were just what you call the brand of Wyverian that are short and old, but that's not a term I can find used anywhere else. The aggression part also is influenced by, of all things, the music of Astera. I actually mentioned this in specific in a 2-part video I made called Monster Hunter World is Disappointing and Here's Why. I'm gonna be vulnerable for a second. I thought that video was going to blow up, but it didn't, and I can understand why. Some of the things I mentioned were kind of granular. Like, I made specific complaints and not enough concrete points. I still stand by the broad spectrum of things I said, but not by the execution of that video, if it makes sense. Of all the points I did make, at least one of them was sound, and it was the sonic landscape of Monster Hunter World. The main village theme in a lot of the series is meant to be comforting, a breath of fresh air compared to other music in the series. Specifically, I pointed out that none of them before this have ever featured a lot of bass kicks from the drum as a driving force, nor did they use brass. The low bass from a consistent drum beat, I felt, tried to keep a sense of forward momentum, always moving on to the next thing, like a beating heart, which I will admit, for Astera, might work. But one thing I stand by is that it shouldn't have been a brass-focused piece. A thing you might know if you know music history, or watched like 3 videos by my goat SADBOIS and are a hack like me, is that the brass section in an orchestra kind of sounds heroic. That's horrifically simplifying things, but if you wanted to write theme music for a character and you wanted them to sound kind of heroic, you would use the brass section. And the reason this works is because of a whole lot of history that I'm genuinely not qualified to keep going on about. So, combining a heroic brass section and a bass kick to keep the pace going, it felt like, to me, that Astera wasn't about chillaxing, relaxing, all cool because a couple of guys who are up to no good will start trouble in the neighborhood. Better get going! It's a sense of aggression that I felt my entire time playing the base game, and I very much didn't like that. If you've played the game or look at some cursory footage, you might rightfully ask yourself, what is the difference between a whole-ass settlement thing like Eggstera? Fuck! Oh, it's Exo all over again. Oh, they always make fun of me for my fucking accent. I have a weird-ass fucking accent. What is the difference between a whole-ass settlement like Astera and the base camps you set up in Monster Hunter Wilds? Well, the first thing is in the name. The fact that it's a camp, even with things slightly settled and definitive supply routes set up, it's still just called a camp and not given a proper name, implying that the research done by the many units of the guild sent here is effectively temporary and not something they're planning on expanding further. An argument I could see made is that you do expand outward into other parts of the world, and while this is true, there's a certain care to it that makes it feel more comfortable. The desert, forest, and ice camps are placed in such places that they're far away from anything critical to the ecosystem. Again, these things are meant to eventually be dismantled and taken away. In the volcano, sky, and underground regions, you explicitly ask permission to set up your base camps from the people who live there, and even then, you're barely in their settlements, just outside them and ready to pack up whenever. Suja's a bit different, but that's not even a full-ass base camp. I think it's important to show how the guild in Monster Hunter isn't an aggressive, go-getting exploration-based organization, but one of research and harmony with the natural environment. About understanding the people, the monsters, the ecology, all of that. That's something which, despite all of its efforts, I think Monster Hunter World failed in. I should mention, this video isn't going to be a shitfest on Monster Hunter World. I don't want to be aggressive like that anymore. I've left that behind me. I do think it's fair to compare them like it would be to compare 4 Ultimate to World, or 3 Ultimate to 4 Ultimate. This all being said, the point was that I think it's important to show a distinct difference from how these two games, assumedly made by the same people this time, follow different ideologies while sharing the same general premise.
And that's pretty cool.
The other thing I think is cool is the handling of characters, and nothing's more evident of that than, well, the Handler. Handler in World, I don't like her. I don't think she's a bad character, and I'm cringe enough to admit that the internet doing some revisionism on what her intentions were kind of made me feel bad for how I thought in the past, but hear me out. I'm trying not to chalk things up to the fact that, embarrassingly so, Alma is absolutely more my type of gal, but it's in the way that they talk to you, the hunter. I mean, your hunter being able to have any sort of back and forth thanks to being fully voiced definitely helps, but Handler in World said a lot of things like, "We did it," as if you guys were a team, but to me, it didn't feel like that. She wished you luck because you were friends, and she was ultimately a quest maiden from the old days, but it didn't feel like you guys were necessarily partners in the quest you were on. Like, the way it read to me was that hunters have handlers, full stop. They need someone to hold the book up and you point at the quest and you go. Ultimately, I can consider it a compliment that the relationship you two have, despite your character being silent, feels like one that's been there for a while. One that originally grew out of trust and whatnot. Once again, Wilds takes this and doesn't necessarily turn it on its head, but recontextualizes it while keeping the same base idea, which is that a hunter has a certain person that gives out quests and wishes them safe travels. The first thing that really stuck out to me was how you handled your first monster fight. In Monster Hunter World, you don't wait for someone to tell you what to do, you kind of just know to put a stop to a thing running wild. In Monster Hunter Wilds, Alma explicitly grants authorization to hunt something, and I think that that's important.
Impressive specimen. And I'm talking about your rock collection. Your rock collection. Yes.
Alma is out there in the world with you, so she's able to see with her own eyes that something is wrong and is acting as a direct agent of the Hunters Guild. Her actions weigh just as much as yours do. The fact that you, the player, generally wait to start the hunt until Alma says so may seem like a leash, but you both are generally competent and know what's at stake at any given time. Alma's authorization on behalf of the guild can be devastating if things don't go to plan, which is something I'm going to touch on later. The thing that also makes me happy about this is one specific moment where a different character, Eric, who isn't necessarily a handler but is definitely a non-combatant, also authorizes your hunt. It's a showing that you guys are all a team and not just working with one specific person because that's what hunters do. The counter-argument I'm hearing in my head is that the quests are authorized when you accept them in the quest menu, but it's pretty textual in world at least that the way things shake out is that you do things as they happen when you suddenly gain the ability to fire off SOS flares. And, unfortunately, you're not waiting for the handler to tell you what you're doing is kosher, you're telling her to get out of the way so she doesn't get hurt. I think that vocal authorization, along with actually being out there in the field with you, is integral to the overall correction the Wilds is doing. I think that vocal authorization, along with actually being out there in the field with you, is integral to the overall correction that Wilds is doing, actually making you feel like Alma is your partner, even without saying she is. To her, you're just a great hunter, which is why she sought you out in the beginning of the story. My co-writer for this episode brought up an excellent point, pointing out to me something that I forgot in terms of the handler and why she might have received some less than favorable reviews, to say the least of it. The fact that the player is silent means that a lot of character moments happen to her, and it makes her feel like the main character sometimes. I argue that that's almost alright because many older games that have a cohesive narrative do also have silent player hunters, but those games also do something which I glaze to hell and back: re-emphasize the collective. The hunter in those games almost always is just treated as the closest hunter that can do the job, not the only hunter that can do the job, which is a monumental difference. Monster Hunter World is very insistent that you are the star hunter of the 5th Fleet, and of the entire New World expedition. The Sapphire Star, as you will. The thing about Wilds is that you might think it's the same idea, but very much again, you're usually just the closest person that can do the job at hand, not the only person that can do it. Olivia and several other hunters are right there as parts of other units in the research group. Hell, you fight with those other hunters if you're playing solo and you fire an SOS flare. You just get AI hunters fighting alongside you, presumably from other units. I haven't looked into it, to be honest with y'all. The real thing about this story and authorization and being the closest person for the job is when at the end of the game's main story, you, the player, authorize yourself to do a dangerous hunt against something called Zoshia. The player character having agency outside of the actual player's control is interesting because a lot of people can and will say that this isn't a role-playing game, which it isn't. But your character having the cojones to say that they authorized themselves to do something, man, it hits different. There is a point to this, though, because there's this debate about Zoshia and the area it inhabits, the Dragon Torch, which acts as lifeblood for the entire ecosystem. There is a character who can destroy it, which would disrupt everyone's way of life and in the danger that could possibly come to pass, or leave it, and hope Zoshia doesn't awaken and cause the danger I'm talking about. The hunter thinks to themselves that there's a third option, because the player hunter doesn't want to force a child to make this decision. It's really cool, but I'd like to think that the coolest moment where your hunter authorizes their own hunt wasn't why they made the lore reason, and that the lore reason is why the hunter authorizes themselves to do the job. I guess this can just lead me into a bunch of cool shit that I really like about the game because there's a lot to genuinely love, and I think that that's wonderful. I can think of my time with Base World and even Base Rise, where it felt like there was things that I ruminated on and genuinely hated up until they either got fixed or things boiled over into absurdity. The last thing I'm going to make a direct comparison to Monster Hunter World about is something a bit abstract. It's the concept of attacks that are on a certain cooldown, which isn't uncommon for Monster Hunter. The past 4 games in the series have had attacks go on a cooldown, whether that be active or passive. The difference is how those attacks are handled. In Monster Hunter Generations, these attacks— oh fuck, my water! Oh shit! Fuck! In Monster Hunter Generations, these attacks were absolutely flashy, and you were expected to pop them at every single chance you got. The way they got around this was to incentivize you to play differently. Every hunting style had augments and changes to your moveset, whether that be adding dodges, or actual leaps, or even picking up a barrel and shaking it until something funny happens. Each of these styles incentivized you to play the game differently to make the most out of your hunting arts, the abilities that were on cooldown. It's going to come as a shock to no one that my favorite was Guild style and Adept style, the former being regular Monster Hunter, allowing you to equip 2 arts, and the latter giving you a gigantic fucking dodge if you so much as get hit by an attack during the last frame of your roll. Your roll that lasts like 15 frames. In a game that runs at 30 frames per second. In Monster Hunter World, when Iceborne got released, every hunter, no matter where they were at in the game, got access to the Clutch Claw, with both trivialized the beginning hunts due to how much extra damage they allowed you to do, but also ballooned the later hunts with how much damage you had to do. I full well recognize that not everyone's a speed hunter like I am. I personally place a lot of importance on how long it takes to do a hunt because that's part of the fun for me. But at some point I have to wonder why this was added when no other gimmick in the series was like this, and no other gimmick since has been like this. It's not even a thing that's required in a sense in other games as well. Shara Ishvalda requires you to wallbang its armored form to break it up. Safi Jiva needs to be tenderized in order to damage it properly too. I think Elatrion also needs it in order for you to help suppress Eschaton Judgment, which is a whole other issue I'm not going to get into because I'm not in the mood to deal with the comments on that. The wirebug techniques in Monster Hunter Rise were woven into the moveset of the hunter more organically than the Clutch Claw ever was or could be, and that's thanks to them being augments to your moveset rather than just one single thing that happens every so often and you basically always need to keep up. Focus attacks are the thing that Monster Hunter Wilds introduced, and, once again, it feels like it's taking the idea that Monster Hunter World had and doing something different. Instead of one attack that can only happen every so often, and only has the reward of more DPS on the line, using a focus attack is an extension of the part break system. When you deal enough damage to a monster, parts of their body break off. Arms can get super damaged, tails can get severed, stuff like that. The thing that leads to focus attacks being as good as they are is what they're tied to, the wound system, where repeated damage on a monster opens up wounds on their body that glow red when you hold the left trigger. They're always visible, but holding the left trigger also opens up the ability to use a focus attack with the right bumper. By slapping that button, you reach out to the monster and do a flashy-ass anime attack that does a couple of things. The first is DPS, which is always nice. The second is that it usually breaks off a small part of the monster that can serve as ammunition for your returning slinger, or it'll give you an extra monster part. Or both.
Boss is good.
The reason I can stand focus attacks and, hell, praise them is that they're entirely optional. Dealing damage to wounds will still destroy them, so you basically never need to do a focus attack unless you want to. Nor can they be accidentally triggered like wirebug riding in Rise unless you turned that shit off. Of course, I personally like to go for focus attacks when I can because my weapon of choice, the sword and shield, make it really fun to do so because I clamp onto the monster as if it were the Clutch Claw, but I can choose to go either up or down, either initiating a burst of damage or going for a proper mount. The mount system is back too, and to be honest, it's just fine. But it ties into the wound system because you can move from place to place on the monster, do heavy knife attacks, another new addition, and create more wounds all over their body. It's as if all of these systems are working together to be cohesive and unified rather than just tacking things onto the hunter's basic moveset. The one downside to the focus attack system is that it becomes necessary to some weapons' advanced techniques, like the Charge Blade's chainsaw. You have to use a focus attack on a wound in order to make the head of the Charge Blade's axe start spinning like a madman, which was something you got from doing a sword charge in the last game. Though, my co-writer has told me that doing a focus attack is just the easiest thing to do, perfect guards and power clashes allow for it as well, but it does feel like Charge Blade is reliant on the wound system the most. Then again, we both might just be Axe Goes Brr pilled. That's what they called me in high school. I can't say I like the fact that Charge Blade got more complicated, nor can I say I like some other moveset changes, like to the hammer. There are a couple moveset additions I can say are perfect additions to something like Monster Hunter as a game in its totality though. Let's just explain power clashes first because it takes less words. You see this? Yeah, it's that. That movie is from Monster Hunter 2 Dose, the second numbered entry in the series, by the way. Offset attacks might be my favorite thing the series has ever done because, let me tell ya, a proper counter maneuver is never not going to feel good. Like, yes, I know that Longsword has had their EI slashes and focus counters before, but that's weird anime bullshit. And I know what you're thinking. Sonata, you love that anime bullshit. And while you're entirely correct, I think I forgot where I was going with this. The point is that other games in the series that gave you a counterattack on non-giant anime katana-based weapons usually had you equip them as one of your extraneous abilities, thereby sacrificing a slot on what could have been used for more utility or more damage. Except for the counterattack in Monster Hunter Rise on Lance, that shit is goated. More weapons having a skill-based counterattack in their moveset raises the skill ceiling for so many weapons. Shoutouts to the Greatsword for having power clashes and offset attacks. The fact that offset attacks are also built into some of the moves you already use as part of your combo is amazing. The fact that triangle and circle on Greatsword is already a relatively quick move as part of a combo, also acts as an offset, is pretty cool. This is all to say that, mechanically, Monster Hunter Wilds has a solid base going on with it. But I know what you're wondering, what about the monsters? Surely you have thoughts about the monsters, Sonata? And yes, I do. Monster Hunter very frequently chooses to open your hunts on a new addition to the game. Whatever that new addition is, it's going to be a pretty simple to understand fight, and there's nothing wrong with that. Whatever anyone has to say about difficulty, it doesn't apply to the first large monster of any given game. That's just facts, and anyone that says otherwise is lying through their teeth. I wish this was a joke. When a game decides to bring back returning monsters is a treat in and of itself, and it shows where the dev team thinks that they need to hook you back in. Not in the way of jingling keys, I mean in the way of letting you experience the old fight but in a new format. Some games do this better than others, to be fair. To this end, the first time that Monster Hunter Wilds lets you do this is in the fourth major quest in the game, where you take on Conga Lala. It's really quite cool that they had this much restraint. I mean, Monster Hunter Rise waited one quest before throwing Arzuros at you. Literally the second largest monster key quest you could do. Bastards. The real amount of restraint that Monster Hunter Wilds shows is when they let you fight the flagship monsters of the entire series, Rathian and Rathalos. Rathian is usually fought in low rank, around HR2, so you're going to forgive me for being shocked that they waited until you beat Zoshia for the first time for either of the Wraths to show up properly. That properly has a specific meaning though, because Monster Hunter Wilds introduces a few monsters that have been genetically modified, which are called Guardian monsters. Don't worry about what this actually means, I'm sure you're already waiting for a G2A price drop so you can buy this game, but it makes sense in context. Rathalos is one of the monsters you can fight that are Guardians, which means that the first time you fight a Rathalos in this game, it's not really Rathalos. I remember when I first fought him, I was just thinking, wow. They really held back on giving us a Wrath monster for this long into the game. And it wasn't even the real one. That's real restraint. Other standout monsters include, basically all of them. My personal favorite is Lalabarina, but that's because for some reason, the spider monsters in Monster Hunter bypass my arachnophobia. Maybe it's because I get to kill them. Nursilla being back because of it is such a positive, because Nursilla is just a fascinating monster design. Nursilla being back meant that another monster had to be back as well, which was confirmed when Gypsaros showed up. The apex predator monsters of each region all do something different, and that's really cool. Ray Dao's roars are so iconic, and lightning monsters are, well, you know me. Uthduna is really cool, I love Leviathans, but can we talk about the newest classification of monster and the introduction of New Udra? New fucking Udra, man. A giant flaming octopus that can have all 8 of its limbs severed. Not that I've succeeded in doing it, but it's insane that they decided to go so hard with the damn thing. I love fighting it, but then it gets a cousin in the form of Shewu, who has this fungal aspect to it? I don't know how to describe it. Actually, this is an off-the-wall thing to mention, but you know what Shewu reminded me of the first time I saw it? I was listening to the Foo Fighters one day on YouTube, probably just fucking around in RPG Maker or something, and I saw in my recommended a cover of The Pretender by this one band called Infected Mushroom, and let me tell you, that's a deep cut. But also then it got me thinking about this one song by Mr. Weeble, I think? And it reminded me of the saying, We are fungus, why don't you bung us into your esophagus? Boy, there is a lot of us. I don't question how my brain works, and I apologize for the weird tangent. I feel like it's important to note that while I do have my criticisms of Monster Hunter Wilds, it pales in comparison to the many things I can think of that are great. I like the progression, I like how things open up to you, I like how restrained the devs feel. Restraint is probably the word I'd use to describe Wilds. Restraint in that they introduce ideas but don't just leave it at that, or let you experience just one insane thing after another. They slowly give you information, turn up the challenge, and let you become the hunter that your player character is supposed to have been. They introduce gold crown monsters diegetically to you, and then let you experience the differing sizes yourself. They introduce the idea of power clashes, and then they let you seek the monsters that do it yourself. They introduce a certain kind of monster, and then expand upon it later. I understand, this feels like small pickings and just what games are supposed to do, but I think it's neat to see the developers put these restraints on themselves when the last major game felt like it introduced a really cool set piece, but then didn't do much with it unless you re-experienced that specific fight again. I think that Monster Hunter Wilds is a definite improvement on Monster Hunter as a whole, and I'm very much excited to see where the game goes from here. The eventual G-Rank expansion is something I'm looking forward to, and I didn't even mention in this video some alternate things that they do to spice the endgame up. I also didn't mention one of my big pet peeves, but that's because I don't feel it's super vital to the plot. Of this video anyway. I'm trying not to create negative content anymore, despite what some of my videos may come across as, and maybe one I have planned in the future. If you guys want a point to the video, here's the bottom line. Monster Hunter Wilds, through its restraint and careful use of elements that started in Monster Hunter World, down to its basic plot structure and characters, ultimately ends up as better than the sum of its parts and a far better sequel to Monster Hunter World than anyone could have really asked for. The fact that the same ideas could be turned on their head is the showing of a mature development team, and one that I hope continues to do so. Monster Hunter is a series that I respect a lot, and I can't think of more than one game in the series that I really don't like or think has less than nothing to say. Which one that is heresy, I know. But I think you should give Monster Hunter a shot. Wilds is a great place to start, as is Rise. You're in good hands with Monster Hunter. And pro tip, if you're on PC, there's one mod that I think you should install for an overall better experience. It's one where the metal noise that usually ends your sharpening action is replaced with a sound effect you might be familiar with. With all that said, my name is Sonata. Thank you for watching.
Nice.
You know, I didn't even add a section about one of my favorite things in the game, which is a literal toggle to see true attack values and decimal point damage numbers. That shit's goated.